This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Ashley Clark, the author of The World of Black Film, a journey through cinematic blackness in 100 films. Thank you for joining me, Ashley.
Thank you for having me. It's really good to be talking to you today.
As well as this book, Ashley has also written a monograph on Bamboozled, the Spike Lee film, and has been a programmer for the BFI, among other places. Where are you working at the moment, Ashley?
I'm currently at the Criterion Collection, where I work as curatorial director, and I've been at Criterion since December 2020, where I joined from the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where I was Director of Film Programming there, otherwise known as BAM.
Do you get to go into the closet?
I have been inside once or twice. Yeah, it's I don't know how much to maintain the mystery here. Since we took it out on the road recently, we did a mobile closet version, which was quite exciting. And there was someone on Reddit managed to find a picture of the truck in a warehouse somewhere. And began all sorts of scuttlebutt about it. But yes, we do have, we love having guests into the closet. And I think when people visit, they're surprised at how small it really is and how much it really is a closet. But I've already said too much. But yes, I've been, let's just say I've been there once or twice.
I always get very angry when I see celebrities going in there because I'm always thinking, you don't need that. Give it to me. So I'm glad they took it on the road.
They get, I think one of the things that I love about it is just seeing the purity of people's reactions, even the most famous people, because often they're on the PR circuit and they're getting junket questions lobbed at them all day long. And then they come to the closet and they actually get to talk about things that have inspired them and things that they love. And you see a different side to them. Ben Affleck, for example, has become very memeable as a slightly downbeat guy with his Dunkin' Donuts and what have you. But if you watch his closet video, he's just full of the joys of spring. And it's actually kind of moving to watch.
Sad Fleck becomes cinephile Fleck.
Yeah.
Actually, I listened to him talking about AI recently, and he gave one of the most cogent, intelligent answers, ever that I think I've heard.
I mean, he's an extremely eloquent and intelligent and engaged guy. He knows his film, and any Criterion heads in the audience will hopefully be familiar with his legendary commentary for Armageddon.
Oh, of course.
And an early Criterion release, and it's there. Seek it out if you haven't heard the commentary. It's up there with Nick Love on the Outlaw, a classic commentary track. It's there's a few in the pantheon, and he's certainly up there.
Yeah, one of my favorites is Anchorman with Will Ferrell, where he spends 30 minutes talking about other stuff and then suddenly goes, wait a minute, are we recording this?
Are we live?
all in character, all in Ron Burgundy character.
Classic. It's an art form. The other one, before we carry on, I have to flag the Abel Ferrara's commentary for King of New York.
Oh,
it's one of my personal favorites. It's just him, a guitar, and a chicken dinner, and it's all you need, really.
I've just listened to his audio book of his memoir, Scene, and that is I actually interviewed him in Italy, and he gave me the most Abel Ferrara experience because I was interviewing him. I said, do you want to shade? Do you want to go inside? Do you want to stand outside? And he said, is this video or print, or what is this? I said, it's print. And he said, what the fuck do you care where I stand? Stop breaking my balls. First question. So,
there you go.
Now, okay, let's get into the book. I mean, you set yourself kind of an impossible task, and you say so in the introduction as well. You have this huge scope because you're doing black cinema and you're making it international. So you're making it. You're very explicit about the criteria you're using. Can you just explain a little bit of that you explain in the introduction for our listeners?
Of course, yeah. I mean, on the face of it, the project is an act of monumental hubris. So I owe it to the readers and listeners to kind of shade it in a little bit. Essentially, I've the long backstory is that I've been very interested on a personal level in black film around the world, how it's been written about, how it's been distributed, what it is and what it means. And I've tried to channel that into my writing and programming over the years. And I've had the great fortune to interview lots of my heroes that are black filmmakers and program their work and help to get their work distributed. So I've been doing that for 15 or so years. And in early 2023, I got an email in my inbox from a publisher called Lawrence King, from a commissioning editor, and she asked me quite simply, would you be interested in writing a book about black film for us? And I didn't really know what to make of the email. It's very broad, obviously. My first thought was, could we perhaps be a bit more specific? I also thought, I have a demanding full-time job and a small child. The last thing on my mind at that time was committing to a book project. But I took myself away and thought about it for a little bit and decided to follow up with a phone call with the commissioning editor. And she told me that she had seen a project or a feature, excuse me, which was a collaboration between NPR, National Public Radio, and Slate magazine called The New Black Film Canon, the 75 greatest films by black directors. And it was as it says on the tin, a rundown of the 75 greatest films by black filmmakers. And it was a group of critics and curators had been polled, including myself. And when I was voting for the 5 films, we each got 5 picks. I looked back at the first edition of that poll from 2016, which was the Black Film Canon, the 50 greatest films by black directors. And I thought the piece was moving and informative, and I'm kind of here for anything that amplifies and helps to contextualize black film and takes it seriously. But something that did stand out was something that I see happen fairly frequently, which is a conflation of black film with American film. And I feel it's important to state that I'm not in any way knocking black film or African American popular culture, which has been hugely important to my formation, my tastes, and my interests. And the omnipresence of African American popular culture is so hard earned, and it comes from a real history and lineage. But I did think to myself, I wish it wasn't just 46 black American films and then one African film here, one Caribbean film there. And I thought to myself, that was really the turning point. I thought maybe there's an opportunity to do something which is broad, accessible, and really opens up the discussion to include black film from around the world, from Africa, the Caribbean, the Americas, and Europe, and in a perfect world, figure out how these things connect. How do the industries and outputs and the themes and the subject matter, how do they engage with things like the history of the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, migration, intercontinental collaboration? You're looking at these incredible American cultural figures like Paul Robeson and Josephine Baker, who've moved to Europe, and Paul Robeson was a film star in England for the best part of a decade. Josephine Baker was having star vehicles made for her in France. Today we have this wave of British actors going to the US. So there are these stories of movement and travel and fluidity. And I thought there'd be an opportunity, if I could get the framework right, to put this in a very accessible format that would hopefully be enlightening and informative to people, and ultimately pitched at myself at the age of 16 or 17, the kind of book that I would have wanted to have when I was coming to find out that maybe films by black filmmakers and what we might describe as black film is kind of underserved and underrepresented and poorly contextualized. So really, it's a contribution to that, and it's hopefully eye-opening, but it really was an opportunity to broaden the scope of black cinema and obviously draw on a lineage of amazing critics and programmers and curators who've done a lot of this work and made these films accessible and available and helped me to understand them, but to put it in a format that looks attractive and fun, and is accessible to the general reader. So that was really my goal.
It looks beautiful. I love the pictures. I love the layout and everything. But I also think, in terms of the text and the format that you've chosen, it reminded me a little bit of David Thompson's biographical dictionary of film, in that when you're reading it, you're going, every entry has something about the film, but it also has the context of the filmmaker, where they're coming from, how the film was made, and that was felt really important as well.
Thank you. Yeah, biographical dictionary of film is a good touchstone. Amos Vogel's Film as a Subversive Art. Also, a lot of music writers and music books. I was thinking of Greg Tate. I was thinking of Simon Reynolds' book, Rip It Up and Start Again, A History of Post-Punk. Where it's actually very subjective and occasionally contentious, but you've always got the feeling of having the writer holding your hand through it and seeding ideas and saying things like, oh, well, this guy did the score for this film. We'll meet him in greater detail in 20 years or something. So if you do choose to read it all the way through, there is something threaded throughout. And in terms of the form, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I noted, I absolutely noted that. It was like, oh, we'll be picking up this. Or there was one bit where you said, oh, this is a crazy film. Not the craziest. That comes later.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So, and that helped me to have fun with it, to think of it as a threaded narrative. And there is also, there's a version of this book where I could do the introduction. It could be an edited by me collection, and I could do an overarching introduction and have different writers fill in, their subject areas. But I thought it would be more fun for me to just kind of go through it in one and be that guiding hand. In terms of how I structured each entry, I made a decision very early on to make it even harder for myself by surgically removing the synopsis and putting that on the left-hand side, because I knew that, I'm susceptible to this like any writer. If I'd integrated the synopsis, I might have been tempted to pad it out a little bit. This happened, that happened, da da da. There's my word count. Thank you very much.
You've read my reviews.
The synopsis. Yeah. What is it? The Tony Parsons character, the Tony Parsons guy in Viz, who's just always trying to get up to his word count. We've all been that writer, so no shame. But it was a case of really just picking out. When I looked at each film, I had to take it on its own terms and figure out what I needed to say about it. So some films that are much more textual analysis heavy, where I've managed to lay the groundwork for the context that particular film emerges into in an earlier entry. But in the case of something like Oscar Michaud's Within Our Gates from 1920, I really had to, in that very short amount of space, explain in a clear way what race movies are. This whole idea that there was a boom of independent films in Jim Crow era America that were specifically created for and exhibited to black audiences. And then I have to figure out, okay, how am I going to give you context for who Oscar Michaud was and talk about this film in the space of 450 words. So it really was a challenge each time to, there wasn't a lot of flow in the writing. It was like, okay, I've finished that entry. Now I have to really precisely analyze how it connects to the next one and what have I shaded in that I don't have to elaborate upon later. LA Rebellion is another good example. I chose a film called A Different Image from 1982 by a filmmaker called Alile Sharon Larkin. And within that space of 450 words, I had to really explain in a very pithy and clear way the entire concept of the LA Rebellion, so I could refer back to it later when I wrote about Charles Burnett and Julie Dash later on in the book, so you'd know what I was talking about. So each one really was a challenge to figure out, how am I approaching this and how do I make it clear and how do I make it relate in some way to something else that's happening in the book, so it does feel like a live sort of organic thing.
I think for many people, it'll come as something of a surprise that once black film starts so early, as you're saying with your selection of films, even from 1913, the very first entry you choose, the Lime Kiln Club Field field day, um, but also that things start so late in the sense that I remember there's one entry on a film that's made in Germany, and it's like this is the first film that's made in Germany, and it's like I think it might be even 1970 or something. It's kind of a late, you think really that's the
Mhm.
first one, so it's that weird, it's always been there. This is a culture that goes back, has long roots, but at the same time, you really it's the context in which it exists has been very difficult and very hard to get to. I mean, James
Yeah.
Baldwin is a really good voices that and expresses that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tonally balancing that, the book should feel celebratory and it should feel fun. But as you say, as a reader, you are constantly bumping up against these slightly shocking revelations. Like it was 1969, the first time that Hollywood trusted a black filmmaker to direct a studio film, with Gordon Parks and The Learning Tree. And that was, you had Melvin Van Peebles' first film from 1967, which he made in France, adapting his own novel written in the French language. And when he came to the San Francisco Film Festival to present that, people were shocked to find this was a black American guy. They all thought Melvin Van Peebles was some obscure French New Wave guy. And it was really from that moment where his presentation of that film is almost shaming the American film establishment, that you get to see Gordon Parks making The Learning Tree. Van Peebles finally gets to make Watermelon Man at Columbia Pictures. So you're coming up against these facts, and the film you mentioned, the Hunting Party, made by a Sudanese film school. It was a thesis film made in Potsdam in 1964, which is one of those. It's an extraordinary film that I think holds up today. You can watch it on the Criterion Channel. I think it still feels fresh today because a lot of the themes that it broaches. You might feel shocked at the idea that Julie Dash in 1991 was the first black woman in America to have a feature film nationally released with Daughters of the Dust, and you may be even further shocked to discover that it remains her only theatrically released feature film to date, and that's 35 years on now, which is sad and shocking. But it also doesn't mean that Julie Dash hasn't had an amazing career as a TV movies director, as a short film maker, as a person who's really inspired her students. So it's not a tale of woe, it's really a celebration, I think, and this is dotted throughout the book, of filmmakers that have never really had institutional support but have managed to find a way. So these films are necessarily political. They're acts of rebellion. They're films that are funded from all kinds of various sources. There's a thread in the book which is this mutual aid. So filmmakers popping up in the end credits of each other's films. That's very true with the LA Rebellion, with Charles Burnett and Judy Dash and Haile Gerima and Larry Clark all working on each other's movies. And that's one of the exciting things when you're researching and you're saying, oh my God, Charles Burnett shot this. Judy Dash did the makeup for this. So there's this entire lineage, even though there are narratives of scarcity and industry racism and exclusion. But it was really important for me to pitch a tone which was not a tone of woe and sorrow, but it was more like, look, these guys fucking went and did it. Like, they did it, and they're continuing to do it. And that is a thread that is very, very exciting for me in the book.
Yeah, I can definitely see how just there's a necessary radicalism to just getting something made, that you wish you could avoid it because it would make life easier. But as you were approaching this book and making your selections, what were the discoveries that you made? What were the films that you weren't previously aware of that you came across because you were thinking, well, I don't want to put maybe something too pat down for this particular filmmaker, so I'm going to look for a few other examples. And was there anything you came across?
Yes, yeah, there was. There was one film that was completely new to me, which was a South African film from 1983 called Amok, which is an updating of the film, or the novel Cry the Beloved Country. And it was made by a Moroccan filmmaker, Suhail Ben Barka, in South Africa in 1983. And I actually came to it because I was in touch with a gallerist about an image, a poster. And I asked the gallerist if they had a poster for a particular film. And they said, I'm afraid we don't, but here is our selection of African films. and she sent through an image of a film, and it was one of those crazy like Polish posters. The images, you'll see it in the book. We used it in the end, and I thought, oh my God, I've never heard of this film. I'm going to have to go and search it out. And in the end, I found an Italian dub version on the internet somewhere, which had, the unbelievably pixelated quality. It was horrible to watch. It's a pretty harrowing film about apartheid. So the conditions were all round pretty rough. But it felt like an important film to highlight. And following on from that, a lot of the films in this book have recently been restored, or they are available. But some, a few of them are not available, and I had to make that decision as well early on. This book is not a streaming guide. It's not here's where you can watch this, because I think those things are really helpful and useful. But the status of those films change all the time. Licenses end, films come off of streaming services, rights change hands, and then on the flip side of that, some films become available. So I didn't want to date the book, by including that information. And my hope is that a couple of the films in the book, if people read them and they're interested in them, it might spark some interest, and we might potentially see these films emerge a bit more in the future. There was a film I hadn't seen before called Mortu Nega from 1988 by a filmmaker called Flora Gomez, which I was able to find a version to watch from a previous distributor. But during the course of the book, I learned that it was being restored, and it premiered at the New York Film Festival last year, and the film will come out into more circulation. It's an amazing, like, revolutionary film from the late 80s, and that was just a happy coincidence. And it speaks to the fact that if I'd written about how it was unavailable or you couldn't see it, it would have been immediately dated by events that followed. So yeah, Amok was a new one to me. A film I'd heard of but hadn't seen was a film called The Woman with the Knife from the Ivory Coast, filmed by Timite Basori from
That sounds
1969.
fascinating, that film. That really piqued my interest.
Absolutely mind-blowing. And, again, hopefully that's another one that I would like to think will be more available in the near future, because it has been restored as part of Martin Scorsese's and the Film Foundation's World Cinema Project. So that one will see the light of day, and I'm very excited for people to catch up with that one. Those, I think, three come to mind as films that were new to me, or I'd heard of them but hadn't seen them. Completely new to me in the case of Amok. And it was an exciting thing to go on that journey of discovery as I was writing.
I hope that this book as well, for any of those films which aren't currently available, proves to be an incentive for programmers and for archivists to, go looking for a copy. Someone, give it to Martin Scorsese, get it into his hands and get him to start.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, that one of the goals of the book is just simply to raise awareness and for it to be a form of advocacy. Hopefully not in a hectoring way, but that is closely allied with why I got into film writing and programming in the first place. And I think for many of us, we're passionate about these things. We want to share that love. We want to, as a programmer, for me, there's nothing more exciting than standing at the back of the auditorium and watching an audience watching a movie that you love and reacting, physically. And that goes back to the first time I programmed Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing at the Clapham Picture House 15, 16 years ago. The plan for me, I was going to introduce the film, go to the pub, but I ended up staying and watching the audience watching the film and watching as they were relaxed in the first 30 minutes and then gradually tighten up as the film becomes more tense and then become very emotional at the end of the film. And you're watching that physical reaction in the auditorium, and that is an act of sharing because you've put that film on for them to watch. And I think for a lot of us in this field, writers such as yourself, it's like we're passionate about something, we want to share it, and that is really what this book is aiming to do.
I was in Rotterdam at the film festival a few weeks ago, and I went to see Sirat, the Spanish film, with my daughter. I'd seen it twice already. And I was just like, she hadn't seen it at all. So I just wanted to sit and watch it. I won't say anything else, but I just wanted to watch her reaction to it. And the whole audience, it was a packed screening. It was pretty intense.
Yeah, and a fantastic film to go and watch with a child. A great father-child film. Well, let's say no more.
Absolutely. She is 21, but I totally get the father child reference. But yeah, I think the thing that's really important for us to emphasize here, and I really want to do this, is that this isn't a sort of eat your vegetables sort of, serious book of, it does that work. It does that intellectual work. Of course it does. But as with black cinema, as with all cinema, the delights are there to be had, and so in the act of discovery and in the selection you've made, there is just such a vast, I mean, you've got you've got Shaft in here. You've got the James Baldwin film, the documentary, which I watched ages ago, which is amazing. You got Black Panther, I'm Not a Witch. There's just such a rewind and play. What a wonderful film that is. So many, such a broad canvas. And that again, that in itself is and I have to say, you've got, is it Medea Goes to Jail? So, and in the introduction, you said if anybody asks you about that, you'd run away. So
Yeah,
now I've
that's
got you
it.
trapped.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately the goal was to have the film, excuse me, have the book feel like a unified whole, and there's going to be places where the links between them are very explicit, where there's shared talent or shared themes. But on the far end of that, there are going to be films that are kind of impossible to connect with each other. I make the joke in the introduction about, if you walked up to me on the street and asked me to genuinely explain what connects Sambizanga, the Angolan revolutionary film from 1972, with Medea Goes to Jail, I'd run across the street. So there's that element where I have to accept that there are limitations of the book. It's not a completely cogent whole, but it was important for me to make clear this idea again that black film is not a monolith. This is not, yeah, eat your cultural vegetables. It's not a guide to learn about, it's not like an anti-racist training manual. There are incredibly bad taste, weird films in here. There are extremely high class, high grade, thoughtful films in here, but they're existing in this universe that I've created, and hopefully leaving space for the reader to draw their own connections. It was important for me to include Tyler Perry because he's a significant figure. He is a huge star, and he's targeting and made real hay and success with an audience that is massively underserved, like a predominantly female African American Christian audience in the American heartlands who've been kind of ignored. And whatever you make of the guy's films, he's making these cultural contributions that are meaningful to a lot of people. They are financially successful. They piss people off. He had a famous run-in with Spike Lee. But also, crucially, for the purposes of this book, there are ways to connect him with people in the past. In my chapter on Medea Goes to Jail, I allude to a quote that Gordon Parks made when Shaft came out, when he talked about how Shaft represented this manifestation of this confident, absolutely self-actualized and self-embodied black man who could, beat people up and get the girl. The black American audiences hadn't had that. So he was very consciously serving an audience that had been underserved. And then you can go way back to the era of the race movies and people like Spencer Williams, who I write about in the beautifully titled Dirty Gertie Goes to Harlem, which doesn't sound quite as good in a Streatham accent. But, you've got in this film, Spencer Williams, this multi-hyphenate actor, comedian, writer, dressing up as as a voodoo woman. And I managed to get the picture of him in there. And it's not too much of a stretch to connect him directly with Tyler Perry. And I have to shout out the great Professor Jacqueline Stewart, and TCM host and author, an amazing person who made that connection between Tyler Perry and Spencer Williams. So the focus of having Tyler Perry in the book is not just to say, this guy makes loads of money, we can't ignore him. There are kind of authentic connections with other currents in the book. As for the film itself, it's bizarre. I mean, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any Tyler Perry films, but they move to the beat of their own drum. Let me put it that way.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's a certain. I mean, there's something about comedy which I think people feel more comfortable about dismissing than,
Hmm.
and I would include myself in that sort of criticism. I've never got Jerry Lewis, and
Hmm.
so people will tell me, no, but it's really inventive, and he's a great film director, and you have to watch him. But it's just like, but I just don't get him. And I don't think anyone would be quite so blasé about dismissing a serious dramatic director. They would be like, oh well, I'll give him another go though.
I think that's fair. I also think, particular cultural sensibilities play into that.
Right.
American humor. They're all, I don't. This is not a. I'm going to go into a whole thing about American versus British humor, but as someone who's lived in the States now for 12 years, there
Mm,
are still aspects of American humor that I just cannot get on board with. And I can appreciate what they're doing and what the history of it is, but it just doesn't make me laugh.
mm.
And I feel very much like if I tried to put on Harry Hill to my colleagues at Criterion, they'd probably politely look at me and quietly get out, walk out the room, because there's a collective consciousness and a collective set of shared reference points that we get. Maybe I should put on a Harry Hill screening at Criterion.
The funny thing is, I remember meeting a friend of mine's dad when I was at university, and he was an American guy, and he was from Oregon, I think, and he went on and on about "Are You Being Served" as the best thing Britain has ever done, and Mrs. Slocum's pussy. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, if that's the
You never
best,
know, do you?
you
You never know.
know.
I could be completely wrong, but I just find that there are certain, again, cultural sensibilities. And when I'm sitting watching a Tyler Perry film, they're just so. But maybe it's beyond cultural sensibility. They just move at this strange rhythm. And I say
Mm.
that in the book, I write about how the film is called Medea Goes to Jail, but 75 minutes into the movie, I'm starting to think, hang on, when is Medea going to jail? Because it hasn't happened yet. So the sort of pacing, the rhythms of the films are very strange. But yeah, anyway, felt important to include Tyler Perry for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sort of the good. I mean, is there a story to be told in terms of progress, in terms of things getting better? Is there an element in which there are more opportunities, or how do you see it?
I don't look at it as one, because the book is so global and it goes off on so many different
Right.
threads. But I never looked at it as one particular narrative, the arc of justice, but, long but bending toward, blah, blah, blah. I don't really believe in any of that. And I think that history has borne out that these things are quite cyclical.
Mm,
Um, Often black culture becomes hot again and it becomes profitable for certain people and you see these booms. There's a big boom in the 90s, which is exciting and interesting, but then it falls away again as Hollywood kind of loses interest in funding black stories. In the UK, there's this extraordinary moment parallel with the Thatcher era, really, where these workshops are springing up and are like fully funded by the government and unions and public broadcasters, like Black Audio Film Collective and Sankofa and Chedo, and they're making this incredible work in the 80s. And then the 90s comes along and things kind of change a bit, and Blair comes in, and this idea of multiculturalism comes in, and so these things are all very cyclical. So I'm not arguing for any one particular narrative, and I think that we're looking at a hugely changed climate now in terms of production and distribution and the streaming landscape and where people are actually watching things. I mean, something I didn't do, I didn't write about a Tubi film. I could have written about one of the hundreds of black films that are made for Tubi and are very like popular and well watched. I didn't, yeah, I didn't have time to kind of go down that road, but I don't know. The answer to your question is I'm really not sure, but I definitely didn't. I wasn't looking at any one particular narrative of progress. It's very diffuse. So the challenge is to again thread that together in different ways that are on theme with what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I suppose it's too simplistic to think, okay, there's just because you are ultimately telling stories.
Yeah, and again, a lot of these things are double-edged. When you have Steve McQueen is the first black producer to win a Best Picture. On the one hand, great, well done, Steve. You know, great film. But on the other hand, it's like, well, hang on a minute. Like, you're trying to tell me that it took that long? That there wasn't anyone who's qualified to do that before? Is that really a method of celebration? So often, sometimes when things are put out in the world as this is the first, this is great. I'm thinking, well, why did it take so long? And what now? Is this filmmaker going to be invested in? Are we going to get a filmmaker who can muck around and make 15 movies and refine variations on a theme like some of their white counterparts have been able to do? And, I love the fact that Robert Altman made however many movies, but I'd love to see black filmmakers having those kind of careers as well, where they could, play around in different genres, or in the case of other filmmakers, just fine tune themes, make the same film over and over again. But we have someone like Rungano Inyoni who made I Am Not a Witch, which I wrote about in the book, and it took 7 years to make her follow up On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, which is one of the best films I saw last year. And I'm not sure people know about it. Hopefully anyone listening now will go run out and watch it immediately. Pause the podcast and go.
The secret is out. With millions of younger-looking customers across the country, Plexiderm is one of the most highly sought-after products on the market. It visibly shrinks under eye bags and smooths out crow's feet in minutes, and the effects last up to 10 hours. Influencers love it, magazines feature it, and people just can't get enough of it. As a matter of fact, Elle Magazine gave it an Editor's Choice Award as Best Instant Wrinkle Filler for 2025. In as little as 10 minutes, Plexiderm reduces the appearance of fine lines, wrinkles, and those dreaded under-eye bags. So yes, you can look years younger in minutes, and the effects last for hours. No surgery, no gimmicks, just results. The best news, you can try Plexiderm for only $14.95. Plus, get free shipping. Don't wait. Order Plexiderm today. Visit plexiderm.com/special. That's plexiderm.com/special. Paid for by Sheer Science.
Watch it. But I just think there are still these fundamental issues of black filmmakers being supported, funded, having their work contextualized and shared with the world in a way that reflects the work. So yes, I'm not trying to be doomy or anything, but I'm certainly rejecting any comfortable narratives of progress.
I mean, it doesn't allow you much wiggle room either in terms of you can't really make a crap film or make a film that is a commercial bomb or something, because if it's going to take you 7 years to raise the money for the next one, you might not even get that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being at uni and researching a piece that I was doing about Spike Lee and remembering him writing in one of his journals that were published. These amazing documents. Like every time he made a film, like a tie-in edition would come out with parts of the screenplay and parts of his creative process. And he was really justifiably angry about Terry Gilliam with The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which was a big flop. But then he was able to come back and that film's been released by Criterion, Baron Munchausen now, and I think it's been reassessed and reappraised, and it's not a knock on the film itself, but there's clear double standard there, and the idea that it's so difficult for black filmmakers to get things together. I wish black filmmakers could make, a string of crap movies and just keep coming back. But you're right, it hasn't been the case, really.
And you add to that female filmmakers as well, because in the sense that, is it Elaine May who made Ishtar and then was sort of consigned to director jail forever?
Yeah, very much so.
And it's actually not that bad.
No, it's not. I remember reading about that one when I was a kid. I think I was reading about it in Empire, and I was expecting it to be literally unwatchable. And I watched it, and I was able to watch it. It wasn't unwatchable. So as it turned out. So yes, you're quite right to point that out. There are these just vectors across identities and filmmakers of color, queer filmmakers, the whole kind of intersection of that, and it does the further you go down those intersections, the harder it becomes. I think it's, again, it goes back to the idea that it's a testament to the filmmakers included in this book that were able to realize their visions, often at great personal cost, and often it was the only time they were able to do so. But it's a testament to that persistence in the face of, at best, institutional indifference, and at worst, institutional malevolence and hostility.
And it's also important, I think, to underline that the intersectionality of having gay filmmakers, black filmmakers coming with work, it enriches the cinematic universe. You know, we're seeing different lives, different problems, different conflicts, but also different joys and different perspectives on life. You know, that I'm a you know, a cis straight guy, white guy. I have my own perspective, and I go to the cinema partly to escape that perspective and to see through someone else's. You know,
that's exactly it. That's exactly the point. And I think sometimes people can be a little scared or hesitant to enter into worlds that they don't know, or feel that they're not going to be able to relate or identify with. But I think that this book hopefully will present films to people that they will go, actually, do you know what? If I give this a go, I might learn something. I might actually find something out that I didn't know. I might even enjoy it. If somebody picks up this book and goes and watches The Watermelon Woman by Cheryl Dunye, they will find out that they've been missing out on one of the most inventive and stylish and funny and just relatable on a wide human level feature debuts I think ever made. So it's good to hear you say that, and I hope that increasingly more and more people come to the idea of cinema in general and world cinema, understanding that it's an opportunity to connect with other cultures that might not be your own, and to identify with other experiences and learn more about yourself through doing that. That is definitely one function of art that has always been important to me.
There is a conversation in the book between sort of American experience, which still comes up throughout the book at certain points. Yeah, I was interested in what you were writing about Black Panther as well. You know, it's probably one of the most commercially successful films that you feature. And now, you know, you've got a film like Sinners, which has could well sweep at the Oscars. Who knows? I mean, I'm never going to bet on the Oscars, and I'm not particularly keen on the idea of the Oscars as a concept. But you know, it's still a culturally significant moment that they have received so many nominations.
Absolutely, yeah, I like Sinners a lot, and it was very refreshing that Ryan Coogler was able to. I think he's very talented. I remember I reviewed his first feature, Fruitvale Station, for Sight and Sound magazine back in the day, and I was very impressed by it. Then he went on to make Creed, which I thought was fantastic. I think the only time I've ever been at a press screening with other critics and everyone was crying. Critics are normally quite buttoned down. You know, we've seen it all before, but there was some raw emotion in that one that clearly set us all off. And then he obviously went on to do, you know, Black Panther, but to have him come up with this original, genuinely weird, sprawling story which melds all kinds of different genres and goes down all sorts of historical, political, and sociological avenues and throws a lot at the wall. I really enjoyed it. I went to see a matinee screening and had a giant can of beer. It was like the perfect conditions to watch it. Like full house matinee auditorium, like the kind of thing you don't really get that much anymore. Felt like a bit of a throwback. So yeah, I love Sinners, and in the case of Black Panther, I think that was central to my narrative in the book, or the journey in the book, because it connected to so many different other threads that I've written about, like Afrofuturism. I was able to connect it with Space is the Place and Oakland, and that's where Ryan Coogler was born. Sinners came out, I think, towards the end of my writing the book, and I was thinking to myself, should I find a way to mention it? And I think it would have ultimately felt a bit like shoehorning it in. But Black Panther was always going to be the Coogler film, because I've decided to go with one film per director, so I wasn't going to double up on individual filmmakers. But I'm very happy that Sinners is getting the love that it is, and I think Ryan Coogler is an extremely talented filmmaker and a very smart, thoughtful guy as well.
I remember watching Fruitvale Station back in the day in Cannes. I think I saw it. It premiered I think it was Uncertain Regard, but it was incredibly moving, and
It's a powerful film.
very raw, very. And it's one of those films that I sort of, the beauty of the festival is I knew nothing about it going in, so even though it's based on a true story, I was just sitting watching it as a story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We're sort of coming towards the end, but I wanted to get your opinion on where you would maybe point someone for like the most obscure film that you picked that you feel, but at the same time, this is there's a film that I want to pronounce, but I feel I'd probably make a fool of myself.
No shame zone.
Symbiocytotoxoplasm by William Greaves.
Yes.
1968. This looked. I've read about this in other. This has come up in other sort of films. 1,000 films you have to see. 250 films you have to see. That kind of list. So this has been on my radar for a while. I might, after reading your piece on it, that might be the thing that prods me into finally seeing it.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a must-see for any fans of non-fiction filmmaking, cringe comedy. It's a truly one-of-a-kind film, a film within a film within a film, where you're not really sure what's real, what isn't, what's the point of it, why am I feeling so uncomfortable? Hang on, I'm laughing now. And it's by a filmmaker, William Greaves, who's a very, very important filmmaker in the history of American film, not just Black American film. William Greaves was an extremely important filmmaker. He made myriad documentaries about Black life, politics, and experience. He was one of the central figures of Black Journal, which was the first nationally televised non-fiction documentary show to focus on Black experiences in America in the late 60s. So in the sort of post-civil rights era, and as Black Power is starting to come into view, he made all kinds of different films about psychoanalysis and activism. And he also made a film he shot a bunch of old-time Harlem Renaissance figures in the early 1970s.
Right.
And he never knew what to do with the footage. So he shot this in 1973 at a big townhouse in Harlem. And it just so happens that this film has just been finally restored by his family and edited together, and it got rave reviews out of Sundance. It's called Once Upon a Time in Harlem. And it sold,
I read about this. Yeah.
Yep, it sold for a lot of money. It's a beautiful film, and it will be coming to theaters near you very soon. And it's a very moving testament to Greaves's his beautiful kind of documentarian's eye and his ability to probe and ask the right question at the right time. And he's a very talented filmmaker, and people who do pick up the book and read it, you'll see his name dotted throughout. He's a sort of Zelig-like figure. He pops up in a lot of different contexts in the book, and Symbiocytotoxoplasm is a real one-off film. It's not like anything else he ever really made, although there was a very belated sequel in the 2000s. So that's the only other film that's a bit like it. But actually, Criterion Collection released that a few years ago, and were very pivotal and Janus Films were very pivotal in bringing that one back into the public consciousness. So that is one, it's not that obscure anymore because it's had the Criterion treatment. But that's one film that I would certainly recommend. I think people should have a look at Living in Bondage, parts 1 and 2, the Nigerian Nollywood film from 1992, which is a wild ride if you haven't watched any Nollywood. I also think that Hunting Party, which is the film that I mentioned earlier, which from 1964, which is a sort of neo-Western made by a Sudanese filmmaker in Germany, which just feels so fresh and so disturbing, and it kind of could be made yesterday, both thematically and technically. It's a beautiful film. But there's so many things in here. West Indies, The Fugitive Slaves of Liberty by Med Hondo, a Mauritanian filmmaker, which I think is one of the greatest films ever made. To Sleep with Anger by Charles Burnett.
Oh, such a good
Daughters
film.
of the Dust by Julie Dash. Sambizanga by Sarah Maldoror. I mean, I could just list all of the films in the book because the majority of them I am like extremely passionate about and do want people to see, because there hasn't been, there's been lots of brilliant writers, and I thank June Giovanni profusely in the book, who received the BAFTA for a Lifetime Achievement a few years ago, founder of the June Giovanni Pan-African Cinema Archive, writers like Stephen Bourne in the UK, who's done great stuff, the African Odysseys team at BFI, curators who are active today like Yasmina Price and Amy Sal, people who are just kind of committed to doing this work. So it's not that there has been nobody doing the work, but I still think there hasn't been enough people writing and programming and getting the word out. So again, this is just my contribution to that. Like, okay, the more people that see these films and know about them, the better.
Yeah, you don't want to go for any specious progress nonsense, but at the same time, it feels like every book published, every program curated, there's a movement in the right direction, and God, we need it at the moment. We need to take as much consolation and inspiration from people who perhaps they had it as bad as we do, if not worse. That's the thing. Listen, Ashley, I want to ask you a question that I ask all my guests, which is, would you recommend a film book for our listeners?
I would like to recommend the book African Cinema, Politics and Culture by the great scholar Manthia Diawara, which was from 1992 and is a really accessible and thoughtful overview of the industrial conditions informing the creation of African cinema from the kind of colonial film project model of the colonial powers making ethnographic propaganda films, all the way up to those decolonization movements and African filmmakers getting behind the camera for the first time and making films about themselves. So Ousmane Sembène, for example. And it was just a constantly informative and thoughtful resource for my project. And I'm so glad it exists. And I think it is, it's not necessarily a super flowing, fun, easy read, but it's very to the point. It's crisply written. And if you want to know more about the conditions informing the birth of African cinema and African authorship in film, that's a really important one. So African Cinema, Politics and Culture by Manthia Diawara.
Thank you so much for that recommendation. I'll put that in the show notes so that anybody interested can order it, as well as of course the book that Ashley Clark has written and that we've been talking about, the full title of which is The World of Black Film, A Journey Through Cinematic Blackness in 100 Films. Thank you so much for joining me, Ashley.
Thank you, John. It was a real pleasure. I appreciate you having me on.